Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the Dead Shore playing as the Vampire Coast against the forces of the Empire. And for this matchup I wanted to, this is still pre-patch because I've actually been forced to kind of revert the patch. I found that it's almost impossible to get quick match games or any multiplayer games for that matter on the beta patch, so we're back to the basics here. But I wanted to try out some of the units that are supposed to be getting buffs in the patch, because I felt that some of the buffs might be a little excessive. For example, animated Hulks are supposed to get roided up a whole bunch, and while they're definitely a squishy unit currently, and a kind of low on most of their stats, they do hit like trucks. They've got a lot of HP and they're dirt cheap, so I figured, you know, there might be something to them. I've seen a lot of good players get some great value out of them, and I wanted to try them out. So this build's mostly centered around them. For my lord, I decided to bring a Vampire Fleet Admiral with a pistol. So she's over here. She does have Hornswaggle, which is supposed to be removed eventually, but otherwise she does have Black Periapt, All Hands Hoy, Van Hell's Dance Macabre, Invocation of the Heck, of course the Hunger, like all vampires, Drowned Dead, and an Opal Amulet. So reasonably tanky, reasonably survivable, can gun down enemy cavalry or lords with her pistol, definitely pretty potent, basically a Witch Hunter on crack for damage output, and fairly cheap. So you get your casts and all cast survivability, basically all in one. It's a very decent all-around lord in my opinion that doesn't cost you too much. For the rest of the army, well, our front line is dirt cheap. It's a whole bunch of zombie pirate deckhands. You can see 3 units there in the front, backed by the Tide of Skjold in the center as a bit of an anchor. On the periphery, we do have a bunch of zombie pirate deckhands with pole arms to protect against enemy heavy cap, because of course Empire heavy cap is devastating to squishy shooting of the style that Vampire Coast brings. Then we do have a whole bunch of deck gunners. So I brought 2 units of them over there. And then in the center we have the Shade Wraith Gunners. And I figured these guys could be good for forcing back. My opponent went with a mass shooting build with, say, crossbows or handguns like the Silver Bullets. I could potentially route them off with the leadership debuff from the Shade Wraith Gunners. We do have a bit of a disadvantage here. These guys are supposed to get cheaper in the upcoming patch. But at the moment, you know, they're still a decent unit in my opinion. We do have 2 chevron up mortars looking to arc some shots over these hills and get in on my opponent's infantry if possible. The main threat, of course, for me, or in my opinion, was the possibility of mass crossbows and handguns, especially the mass crossbows, and I wanted something to counter it, and the mortar, I think, is an ideal choice for that. We do have a bunch of bats to shut down enemy artillery and shooting by some time, and then, of course, the obligatory animated Hulks that this build is really built around. And these guys, of course, hit like trucks. They have pretty bad melee stats, but they're not, you know, for 750 gold, keeping that these guys are just so cheap. And if my opponent tries to say push through with cavalry, we're going to be able to body block them. If we do break through the line, the animated Hulks are not crazy mobile, but they're mobile enough to get in on my opponent's backline. And while you might say, well, Murngulls are better at killing infantry, that's true, but these guys are a lot cheaper than Murngulls. I can basically get a pirate deckhand plus animated Hulk for the cost of the Murngulls, so that's quite an advantage in my opinion. It's part of the reason why I don't really like the I think Murngulls are a bit weaker than for the cost than animated Hulks, despite their pretty crazy stats in some areas. Regardless, for my opponent, he did decide to go with good old Barfazar here, looking to simply be a pain in the posterior with Plague of Rust as well as Final Transmutation. Good selection of spells in my opinion. Personally, I don't really think Plague of Rust is that useful. He does have the Silver Bullets and he's got 3 cannons, so if I brought like Rotting Leviathans or Prometheans, maybe, but Vampire Coast isn't really an armor faction, so I don't think it's that good. For the rest of his troops, he does have a front line of swordsmen. These guys will do great against zombies. He does have, in the second line here, he's got Sigmar's Sons. I think these guys should be in the front, to be honest. Some spearmen with shields in there to protect against large. A single unit of great swords to deal with heavy-duty troops like, say, not Blackguard, Depth Guard. And then, of course, artillery batteries. He's got 3 great cannons, trying to do. Some of you guys may have seen this. I think in the tourney, I do believe it was Aerocrastic in the Everchosen tourney, who instantly or almost instantly killed Count Noctilus with a battery of cannons with a warrior priest, providing the fire buff. It's a cute little trick, but honestly, it's not that useful in my opinion. I'm sorry to say, but otherwise, he does, of course, have his full kit of buffs. But he is very slow on foot, which kind of sucks. And then my opponent does have the Zindler's Reichsguard over there. You can see the mortar shells are raining down and kind of whiffing, just not able to really connect. We are firing at max range, and my opponent is immediately taking a mortar offline with the cannons. So I'm actually going to try to push forward to get here in the dip, but with this great high angle position my opponent has, this is one of the maps that are honestly, in my opinion, not that great in this game. There's some really iffy shenanigans with the lumpy ground and stuff, but what can you do? We do land a nice little connection there against the crossbows. We are trying to focus them down and whittle them down a bit. Over here, Balthazar Gelt does get a little greedy, so we hit him with a Hornswaggle and then send the bats on him. We sick him, and Balthazar Gelt is having a bad day, and he's just getting pounded by the Shade Wraith Gunners and the who we did hit with Invocation, or not with Final Transmutation, but we hit him with a heal. And now Balthazar Gelt is getting swamped by bats. He's not able to hold out thanks to the Hornswaggle, and he's being forced to reconsider his life choices despite the silver bullets getting involved. We are able to get some bats here on the cannons, start taking these crews offline and buying ourselves a little bit of time because my opponent is so clumped up because of the Warrior Priest. We're able to shut down multiple guns at once, which is a huge boon. In the meantime, though, my opponent, with a good play here, gets his Zinthler's Reichsguard around the flank. He is able to sort of sneak around and start pressuring me. But and at the moment, I didn't even notice that. I hadn't been paying attention to my map, so I didn't see the Zinthler's Reichsguard until the last moment. Suddenly, I'm pulling my animated Hulks back to try to intercept these guys. We do pop an all-hands-hoy here, trying to keep these guys intact in preparation for the charge. And fortunately, my Vampire Fleet Admiral is here, and she is going to be able to sort of soak up the charge there. She isn't able to get a cast-off or zombie summon off, unfortunately. But you can see they are going to run over the Shade Wraith Gunners. Fortunately, that Ethereal trait coming in handy here, protecting them as we pull back our polearms to protect. And that was just a mistake on my part, letting the polearms get way ahead of my formation. Unfortunately, Zinthler's Reichsguard is going to get on top of my mortars and start taking them offline, which is not where we want to be in life. You can see they're going to start pressuring these guys pretty heavily, just tearing through the crew, which really, really sucks. Elsewhere in the meantime, you can see Balthazar Gelt here flying around looking pretty, but not really able to do very much. Some of these animated Hulks have dove into the front line, and you can see they're actually dealing pretty well there. The cannons don't really have the greatest targets. Once the mortars are under their arc, they just don't have too much they can do, so my opponent here trying to run him up with Zinthler's Reichsguard, but you can see just how much damage is being done, and a lot of this is being done by the animated Hulks. You can see they're up to 5 kills here, really laying the smackdown on these guys. The polearm's certainly doing some stuff, but I would say that a lot of the work here is being the animated Hulks just slamming these guys around and dishing out a lot of high AP splash damage to these Reichsguard. And with an Invocation of Nag going down, we're going to be able to force them off. And Balthazar Gelt himself is also forced off with that Scourged effect, of course, completely shattering his leadership. And he's then kindly escorted off the field by our deck gunners. Now, the Zinthler's Reichsguard here is still trying their very best, but we do hit them with a Hornswaggle. This is something that could change quite significantly once the nerfs come in. But we are able to drag them down into the muck with our Zombie Pirate deckhands and force them into full retreat. They've only gotten 29 kills. They're able to force down our deck gunners here. But, you know, the animated Hulks, the polearms, they're swarming them, and they're able to drag together. They're able to drag down the Zinthler's Reichsguard really effectively. For my opponent, in the meantime, the front line fight, the cannon's just not able to get shots off. Sure, my opponent's eliminated my artillery. What I should have done here is taken this mortar crew over here that's doing nothing and remounted them onto the mortars that were left abandoned by the other crew. And I could have gotten them back online, but I didn't consider that at the moment. And I completely forgot and simply pushed them into the fray, which is a big misplay on my part. The front line fight, though, has gone badly for me. My opponent, of course, is able to plug up the gaps with the Greatsword. He's able to push forward with his reserve spears, who are, of course, better than Zombie Pirate deckhands. And despite the buffs going down, all hands hoy, and all that sort of stuff, we're just not doing that much hurt. The animated Hulks, though, slamming their way through the front line. The lower-end Empire infantry not quite able to hold up. The Warrior Priest is finally being pulled into the fray, and this, in my opinion, should have happened ages ago. My opponent really should have gotten this guy in there, like, probably a minute or two ago. And now it's kind of late. He is getting in there, beating up on the animated Hulks, but, you know, they're doing good. On the periphery, we are going to be able to bust through this flank. The animated Hulks diving in. These last two Zinthler's Reichsguard, the last 3 of them just don't have the courage to get in. They're going to flee, and the swordsmen are going to rout, at which point you can see animated Hulks running over those crossbows, taking advantage of their slightly better mobility to get in on these troops and start pressuring them very heavily and really dispatching them with, you know, some efficiency. They do have 30 melee attack. They've got a huge weapon strength, so against these guys with their low melee stats, they're going to do pretty well. Elsewhere in the meantime, the crew, as I said, I wasted them here. I should have gotten them on the mortars, but, you know, we all make mistakes. Over here, the deck gunners are going to disintegrate. At this point, I'm basically out of Winds of Magic. Not really getting much anymore, but the Vampire Fleet Admiral, she's up to 41 kills now, running amok. Still, she's able to fire, I do believe, on the move. 316 no-scope with that pistol, able to chop up these crossbows. We are going to get a nice little summon here on the back line with some Zombie Pirate deckhands. The Black Periap definitely helping me get some more Winds of Magic when I really needed it. We're going to be able to swarm all over the Great Cannon here and start putting it down. And once we're able to get this artillery offline, my opponent basically just has the silver bullets here. You can see the lumpiness of the ground here, making it really difficult for the black powder units to get into position. You can see these guys desperately trying to get a firing position on the silver bullets. But my opponent not able to get shots off because of the bad ground. These guys not able to get shots off. I probably at this stage should have just given up and just unloaded on these great swords, but Oh well, I didn't. We do hit the great swords with an Hornswaggle, so that debuff is probably going to be pretty painful, the loss of Hornswaggle. But otherwise, my opponent's army at this point is completely falling apart. Sure, he's able to drag down these animated Holics, but at this point, the warrior priest there getting bogged down. My opponent's shooting has routed off, and a Pyrrhic victory for the Vampire Coast. So as you can see, we did take some nasty losses, certainly. I do think that the animated Holics proved their mettle here. They were able to overrun the backlines. They were able to bunker bust through those swordsmen pretty efficiently, where simple zombie pirate deckhands would not have done the job. And basically every other solution is more expensive. Morngulls cost more, significantly more. You've got the Depth Guard, which once again is a lot more expensive. They cost 1,200. Rotting Prometheans are 1,100. So they're all very expensive units that you can't really, I don't think, really want to bring against Empire. You want to go as cheap and wide as you can. I think there were only like 2 units in this build that cost over 1,000 gold. That was the Shade Wraith Gunners and the Vampire Fleet Admiral. So that just shows how few targets my opponent had to really get good value out of. His Great Cannons and Bolts or Final Transmutation. For the build, though, I do think there was some significant mistakes. The use of the mortars, I was really concerned about crossbow spam, and had my opponent gone with mass crossbows, which I personally think I'll enjoy better, but had he gone with mass crossbows, the mortars might have been a little more useful, but I think in hindsight, I'd probably be better just bring a few more bats to be able to bog them down, win that front line fight, rout enemies off with the deck gunners, have a few more bats available, and maybe bring some scurvy dogs, something of that nature. I forget how much exactly a mortar costs with this much chevrons, but it's probably like 800 gold. And so that was easily 1,600 gold I could have invested in something else. I'm gone for a very aggressive build. Sure, and I think an aggressive build can work against them. I do think Empire is one of the toughest matchups for Vampire Coast, but I do think switching a few things out here and there would have probably been better. The map here didn't help me either. It was very lumpy and uneven map, which made it hard to get good use of the deck gunners. Their one huge selling point was the fact that dumpstered Balthasar Gelt, but besides that, they kind of didn't get great value. So that's just an unfortunate situation with the map. My opponent actually got some good value out of the silver bullets, but I think a lot of that was just fighting chaff in melee, which is once again not what you want to be doing with them. But yeah, I do like this build by and large. I'd probably just dump the mortars and go full-on aggression, or mid-range sort of aggression. Maybe bring a few handguns, maybe something of that nature. Mess around with different comps. For my opponent's build, I think the biggest mistake was essentially gambling on the Great Cannons to deliver huge value for him. He even brought the Warrior Priest for that purpose. Really, I don't mind the Warrior Priest choice, but I think that the Warrior Priest would have been better served in the front line rather than trying to buff the Great Cannons. The fire damage is only going to help against like one region. I don't even know how you've got like Terrorgeist. It doesn't really help much against most units because most units don't have regen for Vampire Coast. So like it doesn't affect the units with the hunger like Morngulls. So I feel like that's kind of wasted on the warrior priest there. If you want to bring a warrior priest, go ahead. It's probably not a bad choice per se, but use them to buff your front line to dumpster those zombies quicker. And personally, I do prefer going, say, a fire mage to shut down enemy artillery with fireballs, and then a bunch of crossbows. I think that's more efficient. But regardless, well played to Floridian Fool here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun to watch. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, do not hesitate to post them. I will do my very best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.